Hi friends, welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge. I call you friends because I consider a lot of you guys friends. I just wish more of you would be friends with me. Subscribers, that would be great. Over the last year, 86% of the views of this channel came from people that did not subscribe to the channel. I think that's pretty low, like 14% of the views come from subscribers. I really wish you would subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out. It doesn't hurt you in any way, shape, or form. So please consider subscribing to the channel if you find any of the stuff on this channel, entertaining or useful. I would really appreciate it. Also, leave a comment, hit the like, hit the dislike for if that's what you really want to do. Any kind of interaction with it really helps, especially if you hit that share button and you copy the link. Even if you don't share it with anybody else, if you hit that share button, copy it, that tells YouTube that you think this video is important, and then they let other people find out more about it as well. I've been doing this for almost 7 years, and I'm just at the cusp of 15,000 subscribers. I thank you very, very much, those of you who have been helping me out on this journey by doing things like supporting the channel financially or by regularly commenting and hitting that like button and doing the sharing and stuff like that. That stuff really does make a difference. And I know some people are going to say, Jake, don't be begging. It's not manly to beg. Hey, I'm just asking for what I deserve. That's not really begging. Begging is, please, please click on it. If you don't click on it, I'm going to be so sad. And if you do click on it, you're going to make me the happiest man on earth. That's begging. That's the kind of stuff that's, silliness and kind of dumb. I'm just asking you, if you like this channel, please subscribe. Please help a guy out. It's hard to make it in this world, especially on, things like YouTube and Instagram and stuff. It's really hard to make it. And we all could use a little bit of help. So thank you to those who do help me. And if you're wondering what knife we're looking at, well, it was on the thumbnail. It's this guy. It's the Civivi Plus. This is an Ostap held design, a Civivi made knife. It's not terribly expensive. We'll talk about the price later on. We'll take it apart. I'll fix a problem with it later on in this video. I'm recording this, of course, after I've recorded the rest of the video. And now that I've got it working, quite well, I'm extremely happy with this knife. And I want to tell you why. Well, come on over to the tabletop, we'll look at it, and you'll find out exactly why I like it so much. So here is the knife. But before we get into that, yes, it does come with one of these, a standard Civivi pouch. If you haven't seen one of these before, well, too bad, you're not going to see it now. I think everybody's seen one of those. It's just a standard zippered pouch. With a microfiber cloth inside and some stickers. What do we got? We've got this knife, the Civivi Plus. It comes 3 different ways. We've got this black micarta. It comes with ivory color micarta. And you can get it in black micarta with an inlay section of carbon fiber laminate. And that's an extra couple bucks for the carbon fiber laminate. This is milled fairly smooth. We do have the texture of standard micarta, of standard G10, I should say, over here. Did I say micarta before? It's all G10. So the G10 has the texture right there, but the rest of this is pretty smooth because it's got all that 3D milling all over it. We've got a pocket clip that is right side only. It's a deep carry clip. And, it's got a step up and everything there. It works just fine, just like the original clip on the Civivi works. But, hey, I can demonstrate it. Why not do that now? So let's bring in a pocket. Like I said, see how it climbs right over, goes to the full depth. Of course, you can tuck it right back to, the seam there, and it just hides nicely in the pocket. It's sort of got a bead blast kind of finish on that pocket clip, so it's not super reflective. Works just fine. It's a good clip. So yeah, no problems there. But I really wish they would have made a second clip. You know how Cold Steel's been doing that for years. They would make 2 clips on things that were odd like this, so that you could put one clip on that side if you wanted to. Civivi doesn't really have any love for lefties. I grew up left-handed, but I've trained myself how to be fairly ambidextrous, so that's not a big deal to me, although I do prefer if they would have made it left side as well. let's take a look at this blade. Now, oddly, what does Civivi call this blade shape, this blade design? Civivi calls it a reverse tanto. Yeah, they call this a reverse tanto. Can you believe that? Now, if you're familiar with my channel, if you've been watching my videos for a long time, you know how I completely dislike the term reverse tanto because it doesn't make any logical sense, because it tends to mean there's, you know, the cutting edge and then there's a straight edge coming back this way, but it's not sharpened. So how is that a tanto? If you only got one edge sharpened, most people, when they think of tanto, they think of the Western tanto, where you've got a sharp edge and then you've got a clip going this way that's sharpened. And that's a Western tanto. A Japanese tanto is very different. This is nothing like a tanto in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of like a kiridashi and a drop point blade had a baby. That's my opinion of it. Some people just call it a kiridashi. That's a little more kiridashi-esque than it is drop point, but we do have this sort of rounded drop point with a little bit of swedge up there. But we've got a nice tip there for being precise, so you can cinch up, or you can get your finger back here and use that tip really delicately if you want to cut things out. Other than that, you got a long, mostly straight edge. It's not perfectly straight, but it's a mostly straight edge. Here, let's take out this piece of plastic here and demonstrate. If you can see through there, if you can see my finger through there, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a little bit of a belly to this blade. Not much at all, but there is some. Then we've got a straight spine, lots of jimping on it. I really like this extended jimping. You got the jimping right there where your thumb could be, but if you want to reach out with your thumb, there's jimping across there too. I quite like it. Bead blast finish on this steel, not too fond of that kind of finish on this, but I really like the steel. It's Nitro V, and it says so right there. And then just right up here, it says Ostap Hell Design. Nice and small badging, which Civivi is well known for. And on this side, all you see is on the pivot pin, you see the letter C, nothing else on the blade. So kudos to Civivi for continuing to do that. Really tiny badging on their knives. It's still legible, but it's nice and tiny and out of the way. I like that a lot. This kind of grind, it's basically a saber grind, which is a flat grind that comes, you know, partway up the spine, but certainly not a full flat grind. How well does this knife cut? How well does it perform in testing? Good. I really liked it. It's a good knife for doing all kinds of tasks. Like I mentioned before, the tip is pretty delicate, yet it's not terribly weak. It is fairly thin there. Nice and thin behind the grind, and I'll give you that exact measurement later on. Cuts quite well. It's not really a slicing kind of knife, like if you want to, you know, slice through something that way, but cutting works really well. And, you know, you can hold the knife sort of like this, and then most of the blade can go down flat, and so you can use it for, you know, light chopping and stuff. It's a usable blade shape. I'm quite fond of it. The handle here, well, we'll talk about the pivot in a minute, but the handle I talked about briefly already. It's not quite parallel lines. It's a little more narrow here than it is up here, but it's comfortable. We've got inset liners, and I'll show you those when I take it apart. There's no skeletonizing in those liners. It's a lightweight knife, and the balance point, let's do it this way. There we go. The balance point is right there. Not bad. I wish it was closer to the pivot point, and you hear me say that a lot, but that's not bad. And the big chamfering on here, the edges here are also then slightly chamfered just at the very edges. It's just angular and kind of cool. The pocket clip doesn't really get in the way. Open pillar construction, so we've got one pin back here and the pivot pin, and that's all that there is to hold it together, which is just fine for a knife this size. But inside this pivot area, we've got ball bearings. We've got a captured stop pin that you can see in there. There it is right there in the middle. Open front. I really dislike open fronted knives, you know, where the liner ends and then just the G10 is sticking out. But the G10 here is already milled away too. So it's just a big open chasm in there waiting for lint to get in. That's a con. I really don't like that at all. But that's not the big con of this knife. I haven't showed you deploying the blade. Not really. I showed you in the intro. Deploying the blade, you can reach over, deploy the blade that way. That works. So, whoops, it didn't quite work that time. And I'm alluding to the issue there, but I didn't do that on purpose. Of course, you can reach over with your thumb and do that. And again, I had a miss there. And a miss again. I didn't do that on purpose. And the miss is because the detent on this guy is bad. I can fix it. I've done a whole video series on fixing detent issues, a 3-video series with each video being, a good full-length video, around 20 minutes each. So I got about an hour's worth of teaching on how to fix detent issues. And hopefully during this video, I'll have fixed this detent. But basically, I don't know if you can see it there or not. You probably can if you're sharp-eyed. This is in 4K. There's a space between that liner lock and the blade. And that means that the detent ball is not sinking all the way into the hole that's on the blade. And that's why, it's not holding, it's not holding the blade down really. I can go like this and it shows it getting sucked in, but not with much force at all. And it's not being held. It's super easy. I can just take my pinky like that, not even using my nail, just put my pinky like that and open up the knife. So it's not being held closed very well because that detent's not engaged. Yet there's no blade play side to side. That part's good. No blade play up and down. Lockup's quite good. If you see that, it's engaged fully. It's just a little bit of a cutaway here to get to the lock release. There's a little jimping on the side of that. You could take away a little bit more of the G10 because the liner is a little bit further down. Just a millimeter, roughly a 1/16 of an inch or so. You could take off a little bit more of that G10 if you wanted to get a little better access to that lock release. You just have to take, care to push your thumb down into there to get against that piece of steel to push it out of the way. You can get used to doing that. Come on, there you go. It takes that extra bit of wrist flick to get it open every single time to overcome that bad detent. But there you go. So overall, that's how it's made. The alignment, didn't talk about that yet. It's right down the middle, exactly like it should be. So I'm very happy with that. The screws, we got a T8 over here and we've got T6s over here. I don't like T6s generally speaking, but let's test these T6s on camera. These are WEHA screwdrivers. Get it in there. Oh, that screw was actually loose. I didn't know that. Yeah, this one's tight, so that had been holding it. There's very little play in these screws. These are good quality screws. So while they are T6, they're not sloppy and they're deep enough, like there's a head coming up on those. They're not quite button screws. They do have shoulders on them, but they don't have a big trench around it for lint to catch in. So if you're going to do T6 screws, this is about the best that you can do with T6 screws. On this side, we've got flush T6 screws, and they're a little bit looser. Let me see if I'll put the letters up right there so you can see those. And there's a little bit more play there, as you can see, but they're pretty good. Here's what I told you about before. The open front here, there's no liner coming across here. We've got ceramic ball bearings. They're kind of tiny. I wish there was more ball bearings in there. No skeletonizing on this. The screws, I should talk about those for a second. There's no Loctite on them. Well, there is actually a little bit of blue on this tiny screw. Let's see if this is a typical. Yep, it's a typical Civivi. There's a little bit of a protrusion there, and there's a little bit of a divot in the screw right here. So it's not free spinning, and it makes the C sit just right all the time. And that's what Civivi does, and kudos to them. Good job. They've done a good job with all that. So now it's time to try to fix the detent issue. And I'm going to do that off camera. You can watch my videos about fixing detent if you want to know how I do this. It's only about 10 minutes later. I've adjusted it. I put a little bit more pressure on the lock arm that way, and I increased the size of the detent hole because it wasn't quite lining up. The detent and the detent hole weren't quite lining up. It's not perfect yet. It's not sinking in all the way, but watch this. You can see it's going to suck the blade in with more authority than it did before. So that's improved. And it's improved enough that now I don't have to do any wrist flicking. It just opens up all the way every time. Works good. So I'm not going to do anything else to that detent, at least not at this point, unless I feel like at some later point adding a little bit more. So that's quite good. Now that you've seen it taken apart, let's do all the measurements and such. The weight of this knife, 61 grams, 2.15 ounces, not bad. The sharpness from the factory, 210 bess, a little bit worse than average, but not terrible at all. The cutting edge length, it's right where my thumbnail is right now, so this straight part here is not sharpened. To the tip, 63.1 millimeters, 2.48 inches. Blade length, tip to the closest spot on the G10, that is 63.6 millimeters, 2.5 inches. The thickness of the blade is 2.54 millimeters, which is 1/10 of an inch. The blade depth this way, the widest point is right here at the heel of the cutting edge, 22.5 millimeters, 0.89 of an inch. How thin is it behind the grind? Measured in 3 spots, the average is 0.36 millimeters, 14 thousandths of an inch. The grind angle's not as good as I would have hoped. This side's got an average of 24.2 degrees. This side's got an average of 23.8 degrees. It's probably part of the reason why I got 210 bess on the cutting sharpness. On this side, it started at 24.3, ended at 23.3, so that's 1 degree of change along the length of this side. This side started at 24.3, ended at 24.1, so that's only 0.2 degrees of change along the length of this side. A knife like this, I think at the most it should be 18 degrees per side, probably even less. This is not an outdoorsman, bushcraft kind of knife. This is urban EDC kind of knife, and 17, 16 degrees per side would be just fine on a knife like this, especially with this steel. Nitro V could do that no problem. And with it being so thin behind the grind, with such a narrow angle, this thing would cut a whole lot better than it does now, and it already cuts quite well. The handle length, 90.8 millimeters, 3.57 inches. The grip area in here, it's right around 8 centimeters, 3.15 inches. The thickness of the handle on the G10, the thickest point is just this section right there, 11.5 millimeters, 0.453 of an inch. Of course, it's less going all the way back. The handle depth, that's this measurement. It's widest right up here, 21.5 millimeters, 0.85 of an inch. And when the knife is closed, where's the widest point? Well, it's pretty much even. This line and this line are mostly parallel. This is 25.2 millimeters, 0.99 of an inch. So I guess they meant it to be right around an inch. Total length of this knife from tip to tail, 155 millimeters, 6.08 inches. I got mine through White Mountain Knives, and it's $65 for the G10 versions, and $66.90 for the carbon fiber laminate inset version. Take off 10%, the G10 ones are $58.50. That's right around 79 Canadian dollars. So that's just about $80 Canadian for this knife. If you are in Canada, Warriors and Wonders has this for $87.99. The design, I like it. Ostap Hell did a very good design of this knife. Civivi messed up a little bit with that weak detent. Other than that, it's pretty good. I would have preferred a stonewash finish on this blade instead of bead blast, but I do like the Nitro V. I like that the badging is nice and small. I would have preferred to have a left side option with a pocket clip. That would have been really nice. Lockup's good. Alignment's good. Ball bearings, they're pretty good. I wouldn't mind if it had more ball bearings in there. The access to releasing this lock, that's just okay. I wish there was a little bit more access there than there is. If you like lanyards, there's no lanyard option. So you'll have to just tie it off on the pocket clip if you really want a lanyard. I've seen a lot of people do that. That's not a big deal, but that means it's not going to sink quite as far in your pocket when you use the pocket clip. Lightweight, I really like that. Thin edge, I really, really like that. Grinding, the sharpening angle on here, that's pretty much the perennial issue. It's not very well sharpened, but you can sharpen it yourself. And with being a fairly straight edge, and you've got a lot of flat section here, if you use a guided sharpening system, it's not that hard to clamp this in and sharpen that thing really well. If you sharpen on a whetstone, since this is pretty much straight, it's also pretty easy to sharpen this on a whetstone as well. I think it's a great little knife for urban EDC. I think it's slightly overpriced. Civivi is doing more of that lately. The thing that I'm most happy about, the design feature that I really like the most on this, is that jimping up here. I'm glad that the jimping goes quite a bit further. That way you can get your thumb back here, so if you do need to be pressing a little bit harder, it's a decent little knife. Probably not a good primary carry, but it's a good knife to take out. It's less likely to scare people. Maybe if you open up quickly like that, that'll scare people, but you could always just open it, kind of like you do a slip joint knife, and that's not going to scare people. So if you're in that kind of environment, you can do this in a way that is less offensive. And please remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.